Start with some introductions, some introductory remarks. My name is Justin Cromlow. I'm on the BNN board, Vice President of BNN. We're a nonprofit for those of you that didn't know this year, so that's something new about the organization. Tonight I'm being supported by David Harris, who's also on the BNN board. And I'm gonna take you through a presentation that I'm gonna put up in a minute or so here. But I just wanna orient you a little bit. You can use your chat feature to ask questions, and David is going to be organizing and fielding the questions this evening. And I've asked him to interrupt me if there are questions that are relevant to where we are in the presentation, because I'd rather explain and answer the questions in the context of where we are. If it's something we're going to address in a future slide or two, I'll mention that. The presentation itself is going to be broken down into two pieces. The first, we're going to cover what I call unlicensed communications. So those are going to be communications that are used throughout the drill, communication methods that the comm leads are going to be organizing. And then I'm going to discuss as a second part what I call licensed communications, what we're planning to do with those hams, licensed hams that are interested in participating in the exercise. And this year, as you may know from the drill walkthrough we did last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, it's quite a bit different. And so I'm going to cover the differences, and I'm going to reinforce some of the information we covered in the last meeting for those of you who weren't there. And for those of you who did attend, I'm going to provide a little more detail in terms of process and procedure than we discussed last week. So I'll just give a minute, and hopefully everybody can see this beginning slide. And as I said, David is monitoring the chat, so if you have questions, just feel free to add them. And just kind of in advance, there have been some issues with Zoom. I've been on a lot today, as I'm sure most of you have, and there seems to be something with Google and how to advance a slide. So if it skips a slide, I may go back. So I'm just going to dive right into this. We have an hour planned this evening. Again, I will cover the information, but we're happy to pause for your questions. So this year, 2020, for the focus on communication, there are really two objectives. So one is to practice the emergency response using familiar communication modes. And this is a little bit in contrast to previous years where we've made a lot of assumption that most of the familiar communication modes for people aren't available. And the second is to build neighbor connections and build a block directory. So I'm going to talk about the block directory. And the idea here is very simple. In our neighborhoods, among our blocks, we should know how to get in touch with each other in case of emergency. Again, using modes that we're familiar with, things like telephone, texting, email, and those type of modes. So I want to start just, I know there are a lot of people participating who have participated in previous drills. And I just want to start by talking a little bit about what's different this year. And basically taking your experience and your expectation and just reorienting a little bit for the circumstances that we find ourselves in today, both from the pandemic and the poor air quality. So, as I mentioned, for communications, the intra-block communications are all going to be done by Zoom, email, text, phone, any video conference service, but they're going to be using tools that you're pretty familiar with because you use them every day. We're not going to be using radios as part of this drill by the drill blocks. And the reason for that is, for the most part, we all live in stucco houses. Radios do not work in stucco houses. They are pretty much Faraday cages. So as a result of that, there's not much you're going to do with your radio other than listen to static. So we've really simplified that part of the drill this year. We're going to talk about escalation. And when we talk about escalation this year, you're going to take, as the comm lead, you're going to take the incidents that you would typically escalate to hams, but you're going to simulate that escalation. You're going to support the same interactive dynamic within your group relative to making the decision about what needs to be escalated, but you're going to basically as that comm lead, you're going to handle that. You're going to both simulate the communication, the waiting time, and the response. So you won't have, other than connecting amongst your group in the video conference, you won't have any external contact other than what you simulate. As I mentioned in the second part, we're going to kind of overlay with this drill, with this exercise, a different exercise for hams. And I'm going to go into some detail, and we have some options on that. And basically, what we're looking for on the ham piece is to conduct some research and testing that can help inform next year's plan. And we'll end up defining all the details based on the number of ham participants, the type of equipment that the hams have, and their personal interests relative to what they want to do. We'll support both mobile hams operating from cars and other mobile platforms, as well as hams on fixed stations from their home. We're not going to use an EOC this year, so we're moving away this year specifically, and just this year, from the escalation model, as I mentioned, and this will really be more of an exercise of the hams communicating among hams to accomplish whatever objective we decide is important, based on the interest that I talked about. And with that said, there's kind of one guiding principle, and that is safety. So if the air quality index is above 100, we're not going to operate hams outdoors. And if we don't have enough hams that have indoor setups, we are not going to have a ham exercise this year. And so we may not be able to call that until the last minute, but I just want you to be aware that there's a safety factor that's built into this. Okay, so as I mentioned in the introduction, the EOC and the neighborhood command post or the community command post is virtual. So as the comm lead, your job will be to simulate that interaction for your incident commander, for your block group, which will retain the typical roles that you've used in the past. And again, talking about some differences, people won't be going outside. And as we go through this, I'll just mention some of the opportunities that provides. So I just want to give you a sense of the locations that are involved this year. I think, the drill continues to grow from a geography perspective. We are spanning a greater geography across Burlingame than we've had in the past. And, in the past, we've also been a little more challenged on the communication in the Burlingame Hills because of the topology. So we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the second part of the ham piece and relative to things we may accomplish there. So again, to cover some basic drill scenario assumptions, we're in the immediate aftermath of a major event. So the communication infrastructure that we've used in the past, the schools, the EOC, we're going to assume that they're not set up yet. They're going to be set up, but the focus of our drill is that time before they're set up. So from that perspective, the hams will self-deploy, and they will self-deploy around the objective that we mutually agree is what we want to pursue. We're going to assume that cell towers are functioning now that there's a mandate that cell towers have to have at least 72 hours of a battery backup. We're going to assume that they're there. With that said, the cell phones for calling may or may not work. One of the things that the carriers do in an emergency when they go to battery is they throttle the calls themselves because they don't want the networks filling up with things like, hey, is your phone working? My phone's working. Are you okay? I'm okay. But we know texting for the most part will work, and we've seen this in disasters. So, when you think about communication strategies, this is something to be aware of. Well, some homes may have lost power for this drill. You can assume that landlines are still working. So if you want to use landlines as a tool, they're working. We can assume that the internet is still working, but there may be interruptions. For example, if you have a Zoom account that's a free Zoom account that you want to use, and it's only good for 40 minutes, assume that in 40 minutes, you're going to have an internet interruption. And because this is something we may experience in a real emergency, having everybody be able to reconnect and to see how long it actually takes people to reconnect and how smooth that is to pick up a group activity after that disruption will be interesting to see. So as we looked at escalation in past years, we're going to look at the same kind of escalation, even though the escalation itself will be virtual. So low and medium priority incidents need to be communicated within the block group. You need to figure out what you're going to do. The high priority incidents should be escalated. And when you end up turning in all of your logs at the end, you should note which incidents you ended up escalating, because that's something we like to see every year just to better understand each group's decision making. The ham would, in typical years be escalating those high priority events. And again, as I've mentioned a couple times, the comm lead is going to have to simulate that. And so comm leads have fun with that. You can throw a wrench into it, you can make it smooth. It's up to you to decide the experience that you want to provide. But we will not have school support, we will not have EOC support, and radios will not work within most of your homes, so we're not going to be using that. So I'm going to go through now two different communication models. As I mentioned, the first is unlicensed. So this is going to be used for the drill blocks. So cell phone calls, landlines, texting, email, Zoom, FRS radios, if you can get them to work. You may want to try them if if your houses are close together. Go towards a window and see what you can do. You're available to use any information of the participants, any of their contact information. And if you don't already have a block directory, this is a good opportunity to start with your participant list with people's contact information, including their preferred mode of communication, and begin to build a block directory. And when we talk about a block directory, we're not talking about something that goes on the internet. We're not talking about something that gets electronically distributed across a wide group of people. We're talking about personal, sensitive information that you want to use in a responsible way, recognizing people's privacy and secure that appropriately. Additionally, this year, everybody's been given help and okay window signs. So, if you have no power, you have no internet, that's a key visual indicator that you can put in your window to let somebody know if you need help. And they can do that. They can look in your window and understand that without having to have any kind of contact with you. So we're going to ask you during the drill this year to please deploy those signs. So in the license model, so we're going to talk about that, get into some detail. It's for hams who are operating independently. So because we are, essentially doing the drill as shelter in place, we're extending those same protections to hams. So you will be working alone. So it's going to be important that you're comfortable and confident with your equipment and your skills. And when I say confident, I don't mean you have to be an expert. I mean, you have to have confidence in things like it's okay to kind of make a mistake. If you have equipment you want to test it out. If you're not sure exactly what you're doing, but you want to participate, you're going to get support from the group. So I want to encourage everybody who has an interest, who's licensed, to participate in the ham component. If there's a question of frequencies that we're using for this year, we're going to use the same frequencies as they were defined for the activities in the 2019 drill. And I'll be sending out another copy of the 2019 drill details so everybody has those. So you don't really have to worry about going to find out where that document is. But if your radios were programmed for last year, they're going to be fine for anything that we'll do at the ham level this year. Okay, so the blocks will meet by video conferencing. And we've had a lot of questions about what video conference services you can use. And the answer is whichever one you're most comfortable with. A lot of people have asked, has raised the question, well, I don't have a paid account. I have a free account and I'm worried about the time cutoff. And as I mentioned, if you have to disconnect and reconnect, that's not a problem. That adds the authenticity of the drill. So there's really not a problem with that. The block lead should schedule the appointment on whatever service that you want. And what we're asking is that by this Sunday, you schedule the meeting and send the details to Suzanne. And if you are a block lead, you've had a lot of communication with Suzanne already, I put her email in this presentation. I will be sending out this presentation to everybody that's here, or a link to it. And there will be a link on YouTube as well. So if you want to replay it for any reason, you can do that. And the reason that Suzanne needs to get your links is because the fire department will be making visits into the different video sessions. And so they need your link information if you would like to have them pop in and talk to your group a little bit. So we need to give them enough lead time to organize their resources. So that's why I'm asking you to take care of this by Sunday, the 4th. So another question that people have asked, well, you know, I have a neighbor that doesn't have very good internet access or doesn't have a computer, or what can they do? So I would suggest for your video conference that you also have audio dial-in capability. So like old school, let people dial in on a telephone if they're having problems with their computer. And I don't know about most of you, but I do Zooms all day long. And oftentimes I'm on Comcast. I have a lot of trouble with the bandwidth throughout the day as different activities in my neighborhood are using it. So having that flexibility will be important. So again, understand the limitations of the service that you're using, and make sure to send the invitations to your participants as early as you can. So if you have a lockdown on the 4th and you know who all the participants are, please send them those invitations as early as possible. And I would also just encourage you to send them reminders. I got a lot of emails about the session tonight and our last session for people who couldn't find the links or didn't get the links. So it's important to keep following up on that. Again, just to ensure that everybody is able to make it to your session. And I would just stress, if you're new to the video conferencing environment that you're using, please become familiar with it before the drill. Folks have asked, I've had a number of people ask, can we use breakout rooms? And why aren't we using more breakout rooms? And there are different features in different video conference solutions. And my answer to everybody has been, feel free to use whatever features you want. Different users have different levels of skills with these different tools. And that's why we're not taking a stand and adopting a single solution. We want you to do what you feel comfortable with. So if you want to use breakout rooms in Zoom, feel free to use them. If you have no idea what I'm talking about with breakout rooms, don't worry about it because it doesn't matter.
Hey, Justin?
Yes.
Maybe we just take a second. I know we've been getting a few questions I've tried to answer, but there may be some other ones that people just want to ask,
Sure.
either in text or if somebody raises their hand. I can't quite see that function, but maybe there's somebody that we want to unmute. Any questions at this point that that I haven't been able to answer? No. All right.
Okay. All right.
I guess we're good.
We'll continue. And we have 74 attendees, so thank you everybody for participating, and we appreciate your attention. Okay, so as I mentioned, the drill block communications are intra-block only, so you are essentially your own pod. So it starts with the drill participant contact info. You're going to have a really tough time doing this drill if you don't have the contact information for everybody participating. If you have a block directory, great, you're all set. Just make sure that the information is current. And if you have a block directory, hopefully you have some way where you're constantly updating it and checking with people and verifying and confirming their information. If you have hams that are on your block, you should indicate any special skills, like a physician, like a nurse, like a physician assistant, an engineer, any special skills, a fire person, a police person, any of those special skills you should have noted in your block directory. That will help you deal with specific incidents. If you don't have a block directory, use this as an opportunity to start to build it by collecting all of this information. And all of the information that you have in the directory is basically fair game to use for this purpose unless somebody specifically asks you not to use a piece of information. So I'm just putting that out to everybody. If you don't want people texting you as part of the drill, ask them not to. But you're going to find that's a very convenient mechanism to use. If you want to use other forms of social media, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, feel free. You know, these social media can be a good way to get a word out to a lot of people, like, hey, I'm okay. If you use social media, if you extend the communications outside your block group, please indicate that this is a drill. Be very clear on that, because we don't want people reacting to information that isn't correct or isn't valid. And again, you know, this is for emergency use only. So this isn't to market your services to your neighbors or to give to, you know, somebody working for you to market their services. You need to treat this information as extremely private and for emergency use only. So, you know, again, if you don't have it, please start working on getting this information together, because it may take longer than you think for folks to get back to you. So I want to just cover some strategy, not just for the comm leads, but for everybody who is participating in this. So first, like I said, understand each participant's preferred communication mode. I can tell everybody here, if you call me on my cell phone at home, and I'm sitting where I'm sitting now in the second story of my home, my phone will not ring. I will have no idea that you called me till I step outside and it'll say 15 missed calls. Now, if you didn't know that, you would think you're calling me and I'm just not answering. So again, you know, people that I communicate with all the time know that. So understand each person's preferred communication mode and mark that in your directory, in your neighborhood directory, or in your drill team directory. So use all the moots to report the incident details to the scribe. And we're interested for scribes, when you're recording all of this, note what the mechanisms are that the information is coming in on. One of the things to be aware, and also, you know, from a strategy perspective, there's timing differences in different delays. If I text you something, you're going to get it faster than if I send you an email. And so oftentimes you have to determine the timeliness of different communications to organize them and arrange them in the correct timeline, so you're not making decisions based on old information when you have more up-to-date information. Always identify yourself. So I'm sure this happens to everybody. You get a text and it seems kind of familiar, but you don't recognize the number and it didn't match anything in your contact database. Well, maybe somebody got a new phone and you don't know that yet. So when we get lots of communications moving around, people have to know who it's from and who it's intended for. You know, I'm sure everybody here's also texted the wrong person at one point or another because you thought that the screen was on something else. So whether you're, you know, in something as simple as email, a lot of people have email addresses that aren't exactly obvious as to who they are. Text, phone calls, whether you're on an FRS radio, whether you're on a ham radio, always identify yourself and who it is you're talking to. That's absolutely critical.
Justin, let me just weigh in on that, because we actually ran a rehearsal maybe 3 weeks ago of the drill, and I was a scribe and I was getting bombarded with cell phone numbers. I had no clue, even though these were people on the BNN board. So it's just really important. Otherwise, it'll be very confusing.
It'll get very confusing very quickly. And so, you know, in previous years, we've sent the teams out, and the teams go out in pairs or some number of people, and they go and they may radio things back. We can radio to them to go check things out. But, you know, we're inside, and we're not just inside for the pandemic, but we're inside because the air quality outside is hazardous. So we need to kind of reset our communication strategies for how we're going to deal with that. So if you want to check on somebody because there's a house on fire, try calling the owner of the house, right? If they don't answer, try calling their neighbors or texting or whatever means you have, but start with the pinpoint and then spread out from there. You cannot go walk down the street to see if there's anybody in the house that has to be removed. You have to try getting in touch with people to better understand what the situation is before you take any kind of physical action. Again, because if you put yourself in jeopardy as part of the solution, you've actually created another problem. So whatever strategy we employ, we want to make sure that we're not putting ourselves or others in danger in our attempt to try to simplify things. So, basically start at the center and work your way out. Neighbors can check on neighbors easier than you can check on that house that's, halfway down the block. So think about that. And when you think about how you're going to organize your directory, there are different strategies. Most of us think about things like alphabetically, but sometimes I've seen some directories where it's organized based on the relationship of the houses and where they are on the street. So again, I might not know everybody, but I could figure out this address or who's next to this house, which ends up conveying an additional level of information. And again, in some areas, the address numbers don't necessarily correspond to a sequential walk down the street. So, that's also something to keep in mind. Okay, so, this is just kind of some of the basics of the training. Don't look to escalate low priority incidents. Just figure out how you're going to deal with those with the resources and the capabilities that you have. And I think one of the opportunities that we have this year that we haven't had in previous years, this year, because we're all going to be connected together, we have the opportunity to kind of decompose some of these situations. So in the past, where you have a team out, down the street radioing something in, and you're trying to decide, do I escalate this? Do I not escalate this? Well, now we have the benefit of being able to do some coaching of the different skill sets that are in each block to help better understand what the right decision is. So what I'm encouraging you to do is use the opportunity of this medium to interact and maybe decompose or break something down in a little bit more detail than you would have in the past. And again, because we have that opportunity, so use some of your training and share some of your approach, your thinking, your experience with others. And again, you won't be able to radio the high priority incidents in, but record the fact that it would have been escalated. And again, for the comm leads, you're going to have to simulate both the timing of the response, and you can make it as simple or as complex as you feel would be appropriate for your group. Okay, so before I switch over now, kind of switch focus a little bit and talk about the ham piece, let's just take a minute, and I just want to see if there are any questions about the block, the intra-block communications and the different roles and what folks should be doing. And David, just let me know if you see anything on chat.
Yeah. Terry Nagel, who's also on our board, she just brought up a good point about just collect the basic info if you can. You don't need to build an extensive directory, but just the basic contact info. And then on Nextdoor, there's a map of your street, if your neighborhood, if you want to try to create a location-based directory. Let's see, can you better delineate between scribe and comm leads? They seem to overlap.
Yes. So what the scribe is doing is basically capture everything and they're writing it down. And the reason that they're doing that, their role basically is if there would be, let's say, a change in staffing, the written record that the scribe is keeping is the handoff. So the next person, if they get questions about incidents that happened prior to their taking over, would know what happened, would be able to communicate information. Similarly, after the fact, when we need to kind of reconstruct a timeline, it's the logs that the scribe is keeping that will allow that to happen. What the comm lead is doing is they're really a tool in the sense that they are coordinating the communication across all of the different resources that may need messages, that may need some kind of information, that may need some kind of status or check. And so This year, what's a little bit different for the comm lead is that because people will be able to communicate amongst themselves in real time within the block group, they'll have a tendency to just do kind of some point-to-point communication. And that's okay. And in that, you know, scenario, it's going to be up to the comm lead to kind of remind people, have you checked with the neighbor? Have you checked with the neighbor's neighbor? Did you try texting them? Did you call 911? So kind of reinforcing the communication model to make sure that everybody is following a very consistent protocol relative to how they're handling the communications. But basically, you'll be responsible in addition to that for all of the escalation as well. So anything that needs to be escalated both in and out will be handled through you.
There's a few other questions. Actually, Suzanne said if the communications lead should simulate, if the communications lead should simulate escalating an incident, should he pretend like he's calling with a radio in his ear?
Why not? Right? Let's you know, let's go for full realism. So certainly, and I think that maybe an important point is because we're for the most part going to be visual, that will convey meaning of your activity to the other participants. They will actually know that you have escalated something and that there may be either information that's going to come back to them as a group. So I would highly recommend that. And as part of that strategy, also understand because everybody, you're going to have anywhere from 8 to 20 people within this video conference that you're doing, you're going to have a judicious use of mute. If everybody's talking at once, it's going to be really crazy. And so if you're on mute and you are the comm lead, if people see you pick up a radio, they'll understand that, hey, something's happening, either coming in or going out. So we may want to know what that is. So I think the visual cues become very important. Nonverbal communication is very helpful.
And then this is a good question. Do the participants contact the scribe or the comms lead with an incident? And the answer is really, that's really fed into the scribe. That's the scribe's role to communicate up the chain of command, correct?
Yeah, and you'll have the incident commander there as well. And so, typically, when we've done the drills in the past, things are coming in so quickly, and it's the scribe's role to get it documented because the incident commander is processing things in real time and may not get to things as quickly as they come in. So the scribe should always have the latest stuff. And if they have things that they haven't conferred with the incident commander about yet, the scribe needs to make sure that the incident commander is aware of either a new or changing situation.
Okay, we've got a few more questions here. Some of these are really good. I understand there is no EOC contact for this drill, but where can we find the closest EOC, Emergency Operations Command, in the event of a real disaster?
Okay. So I would point you to the 2019 drill guide. And again, I'll make sure everybody has that. And that outlines all of the different frequencies and the different channels and frequencies that we use for the different roles in the communication. And what we established last year in the 2019 drill is that 2019 guide is basically in effect until we change it. This year, we chose not to change it because there are so many other things that we've changed, but we know there's some technical issues embedded with the 2019 plan. And as soon as we can get back to kind of collaborating and doing things in person, we'll get to revising that, and hopefully that will be for a 2021 drill.
Okay, here's one. Will there be any central team jump into each of the block rooms? So I think that's why we're collecting the Zoom links, correct? And that's—
Yeah, because fire will do that. I'm not sure, and maybe one of the other board members knows if police is also going to be making the visits. But I know fire will be coming to visit each of the groups that provides a link.
Okay. If the comms people are mobile, I presume they are on the Zoom, Hangouts, et cetera, on their phones. Is that how they link to the scribe?
And that's actually a good transition point. So the blocks have no contact with hams in this exercise this year. So all of that contact will be simulated by your comm lead. The hams will be working on a different exercise, and I'm going to go through that right now. So hopefully that will answer the question.
Let me just see, is there, let's see. This is just a good, what options does a block lead have if there's no ham in a real event in order to communicate?
Okay, so I'm going to cover that right now.
Okay, all right, keep going.
Okay, so so now I'm going to kind of transition from what I call, again, the non-licensed communication to licensed communication. So you know, let's start as an introduction. We welcome everybody of every skill level who has an interest and a desire to participate. So, you know, if you want to participate, there's only really 1 or 2 requirements. You've got to sign up in advance. We have to know that you want to do it because there's some organizing that we have to do to get ready for this. So you got to sign up in advance, and I'm going to tell you how to sign up in a minute. Second thing, have to have your own equipment and be able to operate individually and independently. We do not want hams working in teams. We want you by yourself. Again, you know, we want you to be safe. So you have, based on the people that sign up, we're going to figure out how we use that equipment. Whatever the overall skill level is, we will figure out what our objective is, taking all of that into account. And what I'm going to go through tonight are some of the different options. This isn't the, you know, only set of things we can do, but again, we want to do some work this year that's going to contribute to kind of the greater good in advancing our communication, our long-term communication plan.
Justin, can you just explain, can you explain that photo? That looks like somebody who's really well equipped.
Yes. So I love this picture because I think this is what people think a ham operator has in their car, and this is what you need to do the drill. It is not. That's why I say optional equipment. Like, you could go and do this and have this in your car and, you know, communicate with lots of people at once, but that's not what you need. You know, if you're going to operate from your car, you need your ham radio, it could be your, and you're going to need some kind of roof mount, a magnetic roof mount or something to get the antenna out of your car. Handy-talkies do not work well inside the car. If you're in your home in a fixed station, you have an antenna on the roof, that's fine. You can use that, we'll work that into the drill. If the air quality is good and you want to set up outdoors at a fixed location to operate, you can do that as well. But again, you know, I stress if the air quality is good. We're not sure what it's going to be, but we don't want anybody to take any chances or put their health at risk in any way. So your car doesn't need to look like that.
Okay, just good to know.
Okay, so let's talk about the objective. And I'm going to talk about the objective, and I just, you know, put up the map again of the different locations. I think there's some more locations in the, and the point that I want to make here is that, you know, when we talk about the communications from a ham perspective, in the past, you know, the drills started with trying to dedicate a ham to basically every neighborhood command post. And that, you know, worked really well for a while when the drill was small. Last year, we had to deal with the fact that there just weren't enough hams to do that. And we didn't really have hams in a mobile role in the sense of, we did have some hams that did operate mobile, but it wasn't the case that we kind of knew the best areas for a mobile ham to operate from, to kind of set up shop in order to be able to cover a lot of the neighborhood command post in order to be able to escalate. And so that's what we want to do this year. We want to really move beyond that idea that there are these dedicated hams. We want to develop some experience, information about what the optimal locations may be to get maximum reach to the blocks. And you know, as hams know, there are a lot of things that can interfere with our communications. So you know, it's not as easy as just drawing an X on a map and saying this is where we're going to operate from. We actually have to go and test. We know for a fact from both the testing that we've done and the experience over the years that the Burlingame Hills can be particularly challenging. And so, I think that if we have the right makeup of hams this year, it would really be great to do a little more work up in the hills and see what we could do to improve recommendations around the kind of coverage to have access to more of the houses up there for the hams to ultimately escalate. And with that said, this is all based on employing new techniques in addition to what we've done in the past. So I'm going to new techniques maybe. So, again, as I mentioned, we're going to see what hams sign up. So I'd like you to sign up by October 6th. And I've got this in another slide, but I just want you to send an email to emcom@burlingamenetwork.org. That's the group list. I'm the moderator for that, so those will come to me. And then what I'm going to do is basically take that information of the people that respond, and then we're going to start using the list as our mechanism to organize ourselves and determine the specific details of how we're going to operate in the days that are leading up to the drill. So,
Hey, Justin,
yes.
I'll type that out, but it's it's EM.
Oh, it's on a slide, so don't worry, it's on a slide.
Okay.
So when we send out the link to this, it'll have the PowerPoint, it'll have the information.
Okay.
But actually, if you want to chat it out to everybody, EmComm @burlingamenetwork.org. And for anybody who's not on the list, if it's your first message, just send it and I'll approve you to be on the list, and you'll be getting these communications. I use the list very judiciously, so you're not going to get spammed. You're only going to get messages as they relate to this drill. So, so from that perspective, we're going to look at a couple different things. And again, I'm proposing these as possibilities. This is not an exhaustive list. I want to make sure that we're doing something that's both interesting to the hams, but also that has value in helping to further develop and evolve our communication plan. So the first part is voice communication. We're all pretty good at that. We've been doing that for a while. We have radios that are programmed for these things. So we're going to use voice modes as one of our basic tools, and we're going to ensure that we're able to validate the voice modes in the different locations as a basic part of what we do. So the next two things that I'll talk about again are some ideas that we can investigate using APRS. So for those of you who aren't familiar with APRS, it basically adds the ability to project our location information as well as some other information on a map. So for instance, if we had a dozen hams deployed on mobile, and we're all using APRS, we can see where everybody is. We can see where folks are. So when we get messages, we know exactly where they are. When we see hams moving across locations, we can see that. So that can be very helpful. And for those of you who aren't hams, APRS can be very helpful because there are apps for your cell phone. There are sites that you can go to on the internet that would show you all this information. So in a drill in the future, if you want to know, I can't reach anybody, I'm trying to escalate a message, hams, if we're using APRS, you would know where they were. You would be able to see them. You would be able to see their call sign and some other information. So that's one additional piece that we could use this year. Another is a program called WinLink that uses a Pactor protocol that allows us to send email. So we can use our amateur radios to actually send email messages. And again, that can be very useful for sending other kinds of rich data, as well as being able to communicate more complex information that can be easily recommunicated by others without any change in interpretation or potential meaning. They get the words exactly as we sent them.
Hey, Justin?
Yes.
Quick question. I think I know the answer, but are you planning to use something like Garmin InReach network technology for satellite text communication?
Okay, so that is a great question. And yes, we could potentially put that in the area of unlicensed communication because you don't need any special license to use any inReach or satellite phones or any of those mechanisms. So, if you have those, I would certainly, test them out. If you have a plan and you have messages you haven't used, why not try that out? Now, the only caveat is you have to be outdoors to use those. So satellite requires line of sight, basically, to the horizon, to the satellites you're using. And if there's poor air quality, we do not want you outside. But if you want to use that as part of the non-licensed model, absolutely feel free to employ satellite phones or text-based satellite communicators.
And just a time check, it's about 7:45.
I think we got 3 more slides.
Okay, Richard Kirshner he wants to know if he can be unmuted to ask a question in audio.
Sure, can you do that?
I cannot, I don't think.
Okay, let me see if I can. Okay, Richard, you have the comm.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So what about the police radios, FRS?
Okay, so the FRS radios we may use as part of our ham exercise, but for the drill groups in the houses, for the most part, they won't work in the house. So for not just the police radios, but any of the FRS radios, you will not be using those within the drill group. We may, if you're a ham operator and we have enough hams that have those police radios, we may end up integrating those into the work that we do in order to just test out their capabilities relative to some of the locations that we'll be playing with.
Okay, and just one more quick question. So the texting, should that go to the scribe directly?
So your incident commander and your comm lead will work out some of these protocols. I don't want to say it has to be a certain way because it just has to be however the group wants to adopt it. That could make sense. But the other thing that you run into is if you have a single point bottleneck like a scribe and you have a large group, they could easily become overwhelmed by email, text, cell calls, landline calls, all coming to them at once. And so what we want to have happen is we want the incident commander and the comm lead to kind of set the ground rules. And as you're setting these ground rules and you're making your notes that you end up passing back to us, it would be interesting to make note of what the assumptions were that you made, what the rules were that you set, so we experiences of what worked and what didn't work.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put you back on mute and I'm going to just move on to the next slide here. Okay, so as I mentioned, please sign up by Tuesday, October 6th. Send an email to the list. The sooner you can let me know, the sooner we can start organizing this. In the meantime, if you're trying to decide or you're on the fence, at least get your gear out. If you haven't used it in a while, check it out, make sure that it works. Hopefully you've been on the net, any of the nets, so you know how to operate, you know what works, but let's not find out, during the drill that some major piece of equipment you had wasn't working and you didn't know. Make sure your batteries are all charged up. If you're missing pieces, adapters, cables, I want you to have enough time to get what you need to be able to participate in the way that you want to participate. When you send the email into emcomm@burlingametwork.org, a little bit of information about what you'd like to do. Do you want to be mobile? Do you want to be fixed? Do you want to do APRS? Do you want to do, do you want to do some email stuff? What is your area of interest and what's your expertise? And if you have some ideas about where you think overall we could benefit from the comm plan perspective, certainly put that information forward. And again, it's going to be the hams that decide to participate that are going to help define specifically what we do. So, my main objective is just to make sure that we're doing something that's relevant and useful to being able to move our overall comm plan forward. So, from that perspective, you have a real hand in shaping the direction of this. Okay, so this is the presentation, and I appreciate everybody's time in listening. And I think we have about 10 minutes to cover more
Good.
questions, and, happy to discuss any, even if it doesn't specifically relate to comms, but you have a question on the drill, let's see what we can do to get you an answer.
So let's see, Alden Cunningham, he's in an apartment Sandpiper West in a building with an with the ICP outside will our walkie-talkie work from inside the building to the ICP location outside by the pool cabana?
It's trial and error. It will depend on what your building is made of, what kind of insulation, are there trees in the way, what kind of coatings do you have on your glass. So try it out, try it out and see what happens. And, we were doing some testing over the last couple of weeks as we were kind of, trying to finalize some of these scenarios. And I can tell you, the kind of radios that people have makes a huge, huge difference. And, I don't want to badmouth any radios, but you get what you pay for. And, performance from the higher end radio. So we could have something where a more basic introductory radio may not, accomplish its communication task, where we get kind of a higher end, more sophisticated radio, and it works flawlessly in the same situation.
Sarah Weatherford is asking, after the drill, will you share the results of how the ham practice went?
Yes. So we're going to have a meeting. There's a date that's been set for it, and I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but we're going to have a meeting to debrief, to share all of the information, what worked, what didn't work. And I think what I'm going to do for that is also roll the learnings from 2019, where we identify things that need to be done, into our plan. So we can essentially look at it from a comprehensive, this is what we would like to accomplish and do to advance the 2021 comm plan.
And Holly just texted me that there's an after action meeting, I think it is, for communications on the 29th at 7 p.m.
Okay. Okay.
One reminder is, I know that Dina Gunning is on the phone, on the line, on the Zoom call, and she just wanted to talk about SMC alerts.
Okay. Let me see if I can unmute Dina. Let's see, I'm almost there. Okay, Dina, you should be able to talk.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great job, amazing. You guys have done such a fabulous job, and I'm really excited about this drill. It does test your virtual capabilities, but with all that's going on, as you mentioned, it's about safety first. I just want to mention briefly that for those of you, I know most of you have signed up for SMC alerts, and if you haven't, or if you know folks in your neighborhood that haven't, we highly encourage everybody to sign up, and you can do that at smcalert.info, and we can get that in the chat too and put that in there. Because really we talk about, 5 basic things that are very easy to do, and this is everything that you are doing now and preparing for this drill. So registering and subscribing for the alerts is a great thing. We'll be sending out an alert at the beginning of the exercise. So that'll be a great way, and we can poll and see who confirms the receipt of those alerts as well. So that's all great data to collect as well. You're making your plans now for this exercise, which is fantastic. You're protecting yourselves, your neighbors, and you're updating this information. And again, the directory is really key in wanting to be able to contact people and get a hold of people. So the comms portion of this exercise is just fantastic. And, normally we say, if you have to evacuate and things, you want to get to safety with the things you need. So in preparation for this, check your go bags, see what you have. See what you have that you need to stay safe at home right now, right? We're talking about not being able to leave. We've been sheltering in place for a long time with COVID, but now we're back, sheltering again because of the air quality. So there's lots of different things that affect and impact us in different ways. So I appreciate the safety measures you're taking with the ham operators and the air quality levels. So it really is important to check those things. And then helping your friends and neighbors get ready, right? That's what you're all doing. So you're doing a fantastic job. And the more people you can get engaged with you, the faster you'll be able to recover in your neighborhood, and even more importantly, save lives. So if we're all prepared, that enables us to help one another and help more people. And so the more people you can get on board in your neighborhood, the better. But the Burlingame Neighborhood Network, you guys have done a fantastic job. And we appreciate at Central County Fire, because you are the extra eyes and ears out in the community to relay that information to us that will enable us to prioritize where our resources are deployed to. So you guys do a fantastic job in supporting us, and we want to do whatever we can to support you. So please let us drop by and virtually visit you. It's not rolling up in the engines like we normally would, but we do want to visit your neighborhoods virtually. So we're excited about that, and we look forward to seeing you all on Drill Day. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. And we'll be posting some more information. The other thing I wanted to mention is we now have CERT online available. And we've put that information in our last September newsletter, and we'll have our next newsletter going out soon in October. But you can go to the CCFD website, ccfd.org, and click on the CERT link in the tab in community preparedness, and you can register with us. There's an online form in the webpage that you can register if you're interested in taking the CERT online course, and we'll get that set up for you, and we'll have more information on that forthcoming as well. But thank you guys, we appreciate it.
Dina, what
Yeah.
quick question. If people don't know what CERT is, and I certainly didn't the first year I did the drill, could you very briefly explain it?
Absolutely. So CERT is the Community Emergency Response Teams. And through the state of California, we have an amazing program that we've had for about 10 plus years now, and organizing, and just what you're doing with the neighborhood network, and organizing blocks and training in how to respond to different types of emergencies, whether it's learning how to suppress a small fire, search and rescue skills, disaster first aid, communications, and other aspects that we teach you, because as we know, we're going to be overwhelmed, and we always talk about the catastrophic earthquake, but even now we have other types of incidents that impact our neighborhoods, and really it takes all of us together to come together to help one another, and again, save lives and property. And the CERT teams teach those skills. And it's a free program offered by our Central County Fire Department, and most jurisdictions in the county actually all have CERT programs now. And it is a way to get training and help save your neighborhood and your neighbors during disasters.
Thank you, Dina.
Yes.
Got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I don't see any more questions.
Okay, excellent. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you again, everybody, for participating. This session will be posted on YouTube tomorrow, and we will send the link out so everybody has access to that. And as I mentioned, I will also provide the links for the 2019 Comm Plan, so you can have those details as well. And again, please email if you would like to participate in the ham piece to emcomm@burlingamenetwork.org, and we will get the group organized. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your attention, participation, and have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank
Good night.
you.